UFC 319 just added a new excellent fight, which absolutely saves us Alexander Volkanovski fans from peril. And we also have UFC 321 not so stacked, kind of the opposite. I think this is a bit of a slap in the face to Tom Aspinall, I'm not going to lie. And I don't think that the people in Abu Dhabi are going to stand for this either. This is a terrible card. We're going to complain about this a little bit. We'll have some fun ranting and raving about that one. We're also going to talk about the lightweight situation. Paddy, Pimblett, Arman, Tsarukyan, Ilia Topuria, all of these guys are being difficult. They're all being stubborn. Nobody wants to fight one another. And we're going to come up with a solution for that. And at the end of this video, we're going to talk about every single fight to make after last night's fight night, Whittaker versus De Ridder. So we're going to get into all of this stuff. We'll do a little bit of complaining about 321, a little bit of credit where credit is due for 319. But before we get into all of that, you're probably tired of cooking those same old dinners. A little bit of ground beef and potato, a little chicken and rice. Well, it's time to spice it up in the kitchen because we're going to be making a little bit of that spiced up marinated beef and rice. We're going to start off with a tablespoon of ground cumin, a tablespoon of chili powder, a tablespoon of garlic powder, a tablespoon of Tabasco sauce, 2 tablespoons of coconut aminos. That is a crafty alternative to soy sauce. We're going to add our beef. We're going to stir fry it in coconut oil and serve with organic white rice. And that's just tasty. So if you guys are interested in more recipes like this made with whole and unprocessed ingredients to spice things up in the kitchen, then you can check out the Real Food Cookbook. Try that recipe out that I just showed you guys. It's unbelievable, very tasty. But again, if you want more meals like this, you can check out my Real Food Cookbook. The link is in the description. Make sure to use code MMA for 30% off. Let's get right back into this. So UFC 319 just got a new addition. Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico. That's right. The MMA fan base, we are saved from the Pico Evloev nonsense. The dreaded Pico Evloev fight that didn't make any sense, that was ruffling feathers. And instead of Movsar Evloev, the most deserving #1 contender, having to prove himself against some, I'm not going to say random, but some okay Bellator fighter, it's going to be Lerone Murphy welcoming Aaron Pico to the UFC instead, which makes a lot more sense. This fight is great on paper. It's a good stylistic matchup. And it also means that we're most likely going to get Alexander Volkanovski versus Evloev next. Evloev will have time to recover from his injuries that led him to ultimately pulling out of the Pico fight. And the timeline, the timing is perfect to fit with a potential Volkanovski comeback in November. Evloev, he can rejuvenate and recover, and he can get his training camp started at the end of August. He'll have all of September, all of October to be ready for November. Things are looking good. Volkanovski versus Evloev, the fight that we all want to see, it's probably going to happen. That means we're going to have one of the best main and co-main events ever. Team Australia versus Team Dagestan, Islam Makhachev and Evloev versus Volkanovski and JDM. The UFC cannot pass up on this opportunity. I don't want to see them separate Volk and separate JDM and have them on different pay-per-views, one in November and one in December. This is too good of an opportunity. The storyline is too phenomenal. These are two of the most highly anticipated fights of the entire year. This is going to be one of Volkanovski's most highly anticipated fights ever. And again, can Volkanovski beat the Dagestani style on the same card where Islam Makhachev is fighting on? Can JDM get it back for Volk when Volk is on the same card that he's fighting on? If the UFC fumbles this, it's going to be one of the biggest fumbles that they've ever had. They need to book this. They need to have Volk and JDM and Makhachev and Evloev fight on the same card in November at MSG. That's going to be one of the biggest pay-per-views ever. So, perfect. The UFC has been making a lot of good moves lately, and we're going to get to UFC 321, which is a little bit disappointing, but 319 and them listening to the fans and not making Movsar Evloev have to fight someone like Aaron Pico. Listen, the UFC is listening to us. Now, they may even have some people that are working for them watching MMA YouTube, watching me, watching MMA Guru, watching Bedtime, watching the big MMA YouTubers, because they're starting to make the right moves. And, these are simple moves. These are very easy moves to make. But I'm really liking the fact that 319 is now stacked. I'm liking the fact that they didn't make Evloev and Pico. After they've tried to make it for the past couple of months, they fell back on that, which is what we all wanted. And so, yeah, I'm really happy with how things are going. But let's talk about UFC 319. Dricus du Plessis, Khamzat Chimaev, Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico. And that's awesome. I mean, Aaron Pico versus Evloev would have been great, but again, it would have been paired with us being salty at the same time, having to see Evloev fight this guy that, doesn't deserve to be in a number one contenders fight. Now we don't have to worry about that. There's no saltiness that's paired with a fight like this. We can go in with a clean slate, right? Just happy to see a good old scrap. And Jeff Neal, Carlos Prates, sick fight. Jared Cannonier, MVP, sick fight. I think that MVP is probably going to win, but maybe Jared Cannonier can wrestle and pull off the victory. Tim Elliott, Kaya Sakuda, listen, that's not a great fight, but I'm excited to see Kaya Sakuda try to get a win after getting destroyed by Alexandre Pantoja. He looks dangerous, and I think he could go out there and brutally finish Tim Elliott. And just in general, I mean, listen, this card, it's nothing fancy, but it just has 4 really solid fights. The main event, one of the best main events of the year. And again, the feature fight, Jeff Neal, Carlos Prates, that's just guaranteed to be a war. Cannonier versus MVP, that could be a little bit boring, honestly, because Cannonier, sometimes he can be a little bit technical for his own good. And if you're going into an MVP matchup and you're a little bit too technical for your own good sometimes, like, if there's someone that could make you more frozen than usual, it's someone like MVP. So maybe that's not going to be as good in reality as it looks on paper. But either way, I love this card. Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico, that's going to be action-packed. Tim Elliott versus Kaya Sakuda, that's going to be a phenomenal flyweight fight. So I love this card. I was saying that UFC 319 stunk a couple of months ago, but now that they added that great fight to it, now that they added Jeff Neal and Carlos Prates to it, and the prelims are pretty good too, I am really excited for UFC 319. But let's talk about UFC 321. Listen, this pay-per-view is unacceptable. Like, this needs help. Listen, Tom Aspinall's return, they put him in Abu Dhabi, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. They made UFC 320 stacked. And that's Magomed Ankalaev, who's going to be defending his belt. And he's doing it in Vegas, but the next month they're going to Abu Dhabi. I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought that it would make more sense to have Aspinall headline in Vegas and Magomed to headline in Abu Dhabi. But another thing that just surprises me is how the UFC is rolling out this mid-tier level pay-per-view for Abu Dhabi. They're usually stacking Abu Dhabi fight nights. The fight night that we had last night was better than this. One of the reasons it's better than this is because when you look at a Tom Aspinall fight, as awesome as Tom Aspinall is, as high of a potential there is for there to be a brutal finish, Tom Aspinall fights last like 30 seconds. There's something sort of anticlimactic about that. And it is what it is. That's kind of the curse of being a phenomenal, dangerous heavyweight, is that the fights are so short. And I just don't think that if you're looking at the card underneath Aspinall and Gane, I don't think this is going to be worth $80. I don't think this is going to be something you get that hyped for, knowing that after that Volkov and Jilton Almeida fight, which has potential to be Jilton Almeida just laying on Alexander Volkov or getting him out of there. And, Volkov is a fan favorite. We all want to see him get a win after he got robbed in his last fight. I like Jilton Almeida. I think he's a phenomenal fighter, and he actually may be a threat to Tom Aspinall. But the point that I'm making is Alexander Volkov and Jilton Almeida doesn't have like scrap written all over it. It has smudge grappling, maybe a submission, right? And again, when I say smudge grappling, Jilton Almeida is a finisher, but you sort of get what I mean. You get what I mean. So we're going to have all of these fights with Hamdi Abdelwahab versus Chris Barnett. I really hope that these are the only fights on the card. I really hope that these are the only fights on the card, but they're making it look like this is going to be the main card. So we're going to get through Azat Maxim and Mitch Raposo and Hamdi Abdelwahab, Chris Barnett, just to see a 20-second Tom Aspinall KO in Abu Dhabi. First off, when I say the Abu Dhabi fans are not going to stand for this, I mean, like, dude, that they literally had to cancel an event a couple of years ago that was scheduled to be in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. And because the card was so mid, it wasn't even terrible. It was just kind of mediocre. And keep in mind, it was a fight night, by the way, not even a pay-per-view. But because it wasn't stacked, the Saudis told the UFC, like, fuck off with this card. We're not standing for this. If you're going to come to our country and put on a pay-per-view or put on a fight night, it better be stacked. And the UFC had to move the card to the Apex. And so I think that they're going to have something to say about this. But as they should, dude, Hamdi Abdelwahab on a main card is disgraceful. Hamdi Abdelwahab just went to a pitter-pat, slop-fest, lackluster decision against Muhammad Usman, who was cut. And this guy is looking like he's on the main card. Again, I think it is likely that this is just the only fights that they have at the moment, and that I guess they just decided to show all of them, but it's not a good look, right? I don't think they should be putting up a graphic like this, making it look like a main card if these are the only fights. But also Mitch Raposo, I mean, Azat Maxim, I mean, he's kind of an exciting fighter. Don't get me wrong. He just had a phenomenal fight in his last outing against Tagir Ulanbekov, but Mitch Raposo on a main card? Just stop. Like, I understand that these fights where, you know, both fighters don't have big names, they can be really entertaining, especially flyweight fights. But you have to have big name value on a pay-per-view that's going to cost $80. Ikram Aleskarov versus Jung Young Park. Listen, Ikram Aleskarov is pretty entertaining. Jung Young Park is pretty entertaining, but I'm talking name value. Feature fight on a pay-per-view? Where is the name value? Alexander Volkov, Jilton Almeida, that's fine. That's main card pay-per-view worthy, but you can't stand for this. You can't have Hamdi Abdelwahab on a fucking main card. I look at this as a bit of a slap in the face to Tom Aspinall, man. Now, I don't think it's intentional. I don't think the UFC would sabotage their business to make Tom Aspinall look like a failure as far as being a draw goes, to rub it in the fans' faces so that they can say, oh, see, you guys hated John Jones so much, but now no one cares about Aspinall. Look, Aspinall, every time you hear his name, you're going to associate him with shitty pay-per-views, and you're going to start to hate the fact that Jones left. But, like, I don't think they would do that. So it's likely that this is not the final card, but the easiest way to fix all of this is just to book Arman Tsarukyan and Paddy Pimblett for UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi. If they make this the feature fight, that's an amazing card, okay? Just adding one big fight to it. I'm not even going to say it's an amazing card. It's still not an amazing card, but it's a decent card, okay? Now, we're going to talk about Paddy Pimblett and Arman Tsarukyan because both of these guys don't want to fight each other, and that's for different reasons. And Ilia Topuria has been saying he doesn't want to fight Arman Tsarukyan unless Arman Tsarukyan gets another win, because he can't trust Arman Tsarukyan to make weight, given that he pulled out of the last title fight. And so he wants Arman to prove that he can actually make weight and win another time before he gets in that octagon. And, I mean, this is just a crazy situation. So essentially, Arman, he's saying that he doesn't want to fight Paddy Pimblett. And his reasoning is this, and I quote, he says, "You've got to delete Pimblett from the rankings. He's not deserving to be in the top 10. He beat the last three guys, Chandler, Bobby Green, Ferguson. All of those guys were on crazy loss streaks. And you want to bring that guy to fight for the title? You shouldn't even mention his name. He doesn't even deserve to have his name mentioned to be in the title talk." So that's what Arman Tsarukyan is saying. And it is kind of true. Let's be real. Paddy Pimblett has had the easiest path to the top 5 or to title talk contention out of any other person in the UFC. His last 3 opponents, if you combine all of their loss streaks, they're all 0 for 13. Michael Chandler in his last 3 fights, 0 for 3. Bobby Green in his last 2 fights, 0 for 2. Tony Ferguson in his last 8 fights, 0 for 8. These are the people that Paddy Pimblett is coming off of wins against. You compare that to guys like Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje's coming off of a win over Rafael Fiziev. Arman Tsarukyan coming off of a win over Charles Oliveira. Max Holloway coming off of a win in the lightweight division over Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. And so you compare that to Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett's literally beating only old, washed up, on their way out, losing skid fighters. And so I totally understand why Arman Tsarukyan is annoyed with Paddy Pimblett's name being brought up, because he really is just a hype merchant. Like, he's just got a lot of hype. Now, don't get me wrong. He proved that he was pretty good. He proved against Michael Chandler just with the eye test alone that he's a solid fighter. But the level of competition absolutely sucks. And let's be honest, if he didn't have half the hype that he has now, we wouldn't really be talking about him. And when I say hype, I just mean the name value. Paddy Pimblett just has big name value in general, which is good, which is why I wouldn't mind seeing Paddy Pimblett get one of these big fights. You know what I mean? Like, I can admit Paddy Pimblett has these wins that aren't that great, but he's still a decent fighter, and I would still like to see him in big fights, because at the end of the day, part of the UFC is also just, I want to have an entertaining buildup every once in a while, right? And on the other side of the token, you have Arman Tsarukyan, who's saying that he doesn't want to fight Paddy Pimblett, saying that he will only fight for the belt next. But the problem with that, though, is that Arman Tsarukyan has only fought once in the last 600 days. So Arman Tsarukyan saying that Pimblett shouldn't be in the conversation and that I shouldn't have to fight anyone else. But listen, man, you've been on the couch for 470 days. The last time you fought was at UFC 300. Again, before that, you have to go back 600 days to get to his last fight before the 300 fight. So in the last 600 days, this guy's only fought once. You just cannot rely on the UFC to give you a title shot at this point. You got to be more realistic, especially because the last fight that you were really booked for, you pulled out at the last second. So to expect the UFC to reward that is just delusional. And so Arman Tsarukyan should have to fight one more time. Listen, if they booked Arman Tsarukyan versus Ilia Topuria next, I would be happy about that. I'd be totally fine with that. But that's not the world that we live in. The UFC is not going to operate like that. And if Arman Tsarukyan is talking all of this big talk against Paddy Pimblett and he's saying that Pimblett isn't even that good, then why should you have a problem taking him on? If he's not that great, if this guy's a fraud, then you should have no problem beating him, right? And it's going to be a big fight. It's going to be a big fight. And think about it like this. If you beat Paddy Pimblett, that potential Ilia Topuria matchup gets that much bigger. And the UFC should want Arman Tsarukyan to take out a big name like Paddy Pimblett before booking him against Ilia Topuria, because the number 2 argument against Arman Tsarukyan getting the Topuria matchup is that nobody cares about Arman. That's what Paddy says about him. No one cares about Arman, lad. And so, Paddy doesn't want to fight Arman because he views Arman as like the smallest name in the top 5. And that's why he wants to fight Rufus. He wants to fight Justin Gaethje, who's got more fanfare. But Gaethje doesn't want to fight anyone else, so Gaethje's taken himself out of the equation as well. The UFC is not going to reward Justin Gaethje's behavior. And so the main point that I'm making is, if Arman wants to go into a Topuria fight and have that fight be massive, okay, if the UFC looks at Arman Tsarukyan and they're like, well, the Tsarukyan fight is like the 3rd biggest fight we can make with Topuria right now. The Pimblett fight is bigger, but Pimblett doesn't really deserve it yet. And obviously the Makhachev fight is the biggest fight you can make. I think it would make sense to force Arman Tsarukyan to fight a big name with a lot of hype like Paddy Pimblett. So if you beat Paddy Pimblett, again, there's going to be a crazy buildup to that fight. There's going to be a lot of trash talk. There's going to be a lot at stake. People are going to know that whoever wins gets to fight Ilia Topuria next. If Arman beats Paddy Pimblett and finishes him or just has an impressive performance, that Topuria fight is that much bigger. If Pimblett goes out there and beats Arman Tsarukyan, you can't call Pimblett a fraud anymore. You can't bring up the fact that he's only beating old heads, because a win over Arman is a win over a guy that's like 28 years old in his prime, as elite as it gets in the lightweight division as far as skill goes. So this is a no-brainer. You have to book this fight. You just have to do it. And, Ilia Topuria has been saying he doesn't want to fight Arman, and he's saying he wants to beat up Paddy Pimblett. I think that Ilia Topuria is honestly rage baiting with this take. I think that Topuria, I don't know why he doesn't like Arman. It's kind of weird to me, because I thought that they would be sort of cordial with each other. I'm surprised that Topuria is like dissing Arman. Arman's offering Ilia Topuria $500K to take the fight. He says if he loses to Ilia, if Arman loses to Ilia, he will give Ilia $500K. So I don't know what's up with Topuria really having something against Arman Tsarukyan. As I said, I think it may just be rage bait, like he's trying to big brother him. He's trying to get a power trip over him or something like that. But essentially, with UFC 321 lacking, it needs another big fight. And it just makes sense to have that fight be Arman Tsarukyan versus Paddy Pimblett. Whoever wins that is clear next in line for Ilia Topuria. and then all of the problems are fixed. And I think Topuria is not going to have an issue fighting Arman if he gets back in the cage and proves that he can make weight. So, yeah, it's a no-brainer. The UFC needs to make this fight, and they need to do it in Abu Dhabi because that card is in desperate need of help, okay? So, Paddy Pimblett, I don't want to hear, oh, no, I don't want to fight Arman because it has to be Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje doesn't want to fight anyone other than for the title, and that's not happening. And Arman Tsarukyan, you've not fought since UFC 300, well over a year ago. You can't rely on the UFC to reward that, especially when you pulled out of the last fight being a title fight against Islam Makhachev and jeopardized the whole event and, you know, sort of fucked up the division a little bit. It's delusional to expect the UFC to give you a title shot next. That's not how they operate. So, yeah, this is a no-brainer. It needs to happen. Let's get on to fights to make. I want to see Robert Whittaker fight Brendan Allen. Let's give Whittaker a bit of a break. Okay, let's give him a bit of a break from being in this hectic, chaotic, extremely competitive, title contention, top 5 type of fights all the time. Let's let Whittaker get a bit of a breather, get a bit of a step back in competition. Now, to be fair, Reynor de Ridder was a step back in competition, but it was one of those things where he's so new to the UFC, he didn't really know where he stacked up. He had potential to be like, you know, someone that was nowhere near Whittaker's level or someone that was going to go out there and bully Robert Whittaker. But we know where Brendan Allen stands a lot more than we knew where Reynor de Ridder stands. And so I think this is a good fight to make. Again, I'm kind of done with seeing Robert Whittaker fight the best guys in the division, people that are one fight away from fighting for a belt. It's not because Whittaker's washed. It's just because, you know, he's been doing that for so long. Let's give him a Brendan Allen matchup. Brendan Allen's on a good win streak. Whittaker taking a couple losses in a row. It makes sense. Let's just have this as like a fight night main event. For Reynor de Ridder, I think we do him versus Adesanya. I was thinking maybe Reynor de Ridder versus the loser of Hamzat versus Dricus du Plessis, but I think he's going to want to be active. Even though he did get dropped and he took some damage, I could see Reynor de Ridder, because of his activity, getting in the cage a couple of months from now. And Adesanya's been talking about making a comeback, and he wants to fight Sean Strickland, but Sean Strickland's suspended, so that's not going to happen. Why not make this the main event of that Perth fight night that's coming up? And if Reynor de Ridder's not ready for that, maybe you could make this as a main event for another fight night in November or December. But yeah, I think this is a fight that makes sense. Adesanya is going to have to go for a KO because that seems to be the only way to beat Reynor de Ridder, is like putting his lights out. Because if you can't finish him, especially in a 5-rounder, he's just going to wear on you. But again, for Adesanya, there's no easy matchup in the top 10. Brendan Allen's the only fighter that I can think of that is going to be a relatively easy matchup. And even that is a tough matchup because Brendan Allen can grapple. But it's a big fight. Adesanya wants to have a big fight. And yeah, maybe he can get it back against the goofy style. He took a loss to du Plessis. Maybe he can, you know, the storyline can be, well, can Adesanya redeem himself against DDP 2.0? So, Jan. I want to see Jan fight the winner of Merab and Sandhagen. That's a no-brainer. I don't want to see him have to fight Sean O'Malley next. Sean O'Malley's on a 2-fight loss streak. Petr Yan's on a 3-fight win streak. He deserves to fight for the title. And either way, it's going to be a rematch. For Marcus McGee, I want to see him fight Vinicius Oliveira. Marcus McGee proved that he was pretty good. Against Petr Yan, he put up a pretty tough fight. And I think it makes sense to book him against another solid, you know, in their prime bantamweight, and that would be Vinicius Oliveira. I don't know who wins this. This is like a 50-50 matchup, which is why it's so fun. Both guys are pretty high output. They both put on good fights every single time. So I think this would be an amazing fight. You could put this on a pay-per-view. Okay? Bogdan Guskov. I want to see him fight Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes, 3-fight win streak. Bogdan Guskov has been KOing everybody. Someone is going to get knocked out in this matchup. I think this could be a main event of a fight night. I think they can book this as like, you know, the main event of the final fight night of the year that they do in Florida every year. Although they usually go with a bit of a bigger fight. If they go to the Apex, maybe you could do this as an Apex main event, but, you know, or you could put it on a pay-per-view. It's a phenomenal fight, guaranteed KO. So I think whoever wins this would then deserve a number 1 contenders fight. So yeah, let's get on to Shara Bullet. I want to see him fight Roman Kopylov. I'm tired of seeing Bullet fighting these guys that are just nowhere near his level outside of the rankings. I know that he fought MVP. That was his chance to prove himself, and he came up short, but it's time to give him another shot against someone that's actually ranked. Kopylov coming off of a bad loss to Paulo Costa. He didn't look that good in that fight. But I think this would be very competitive. I think this would be really competitive. Kopylov has the better hands, has great kicks as well. Bullet doesn't have the best finishing potential, but again, he's been schooling everyone that's not Michael Venom Page for the most part, and this is a big step up in competition. Both high output strikers, they could add this to UFC 321. I talked about how the UFC should make the Pimblett and Arman Tsarukyan fight. Imagine if they add this to the main card as well. They can get rid of the Chris Barnett fight. They could also get rid of the Mitch Raposo fight. They could move all of those to the prelims. You have Tsarukyan and Pimblett and Nurmagomedov and Roman Kopylov on that main card. Then we're talking about an unbelievably stacked card. So this is fireworks. Bryce Mitchell, I want his next fight to be against Cody Garbrandt. I was thinking about maybe doing Bryce Mitchell versus Kyler Phillips, but then again, it's just putting Bryce Mitchell against another guy with no gas tank. Maybe you could do him versus Jackson, right? That's a potential matchup if you want to give him someone that's ranked. But I think that Mitchell versus Cody Garbrandt could be interesting. Both have big names. Cody Garbrandt has that former champ aura, a little bit of that brick wall takedown defense aura, but Bryce Mitchell, maybe he'll be able to out-muscle Cody Garbrandt now that he's a little bit more physically imposing in the bantamweight division. I think this is just a solid matchup, big name matchup that you could put as like the headliner of the prelims for a pay-per-view, or you could put this on like a main card of a big fight night, right? I think this is a good one. And for Davy Grant, last but not least, you got to put him up against someone that he's going to school, someone that he's going to trash and thrash. I want Davy Grant to fight Munoz, the tough out in the bantamweight division. Another guy with a hard noggin where we're going to see Davy Grant go out there and have a 3-round scrappy fight where Munoz is tough enough not to get KO'd and he's tough enough to land every once in a while, but, you know, Davy Grant's going to be able to style on him, run up highlights on him. So I think we do Davy Grant versus Pedro Munoz. I was also maybe thinking of Davy Grant versus Kyler Phillips. That could be pretty good as well. But I want to see Davy Grant fight in the UK. So whenever the UFC goes back to the UK, put Davy Grant on the main card, whether it's a fight night or a pay-per-view card. I think he would get a lot of support from the fans. He's not going to be around for that much longer, even though he's still looking good. We got to take advantage of it. And he is the most popular he's ever been at this point. In his late 30s, early 40s. Davy Grant looks like he's in his 40s. I don't know if he actually is, but he's close to his 40s. This is a good fight. Yeah, and I forgot about this, but we also have Nurmagomedov versus Bautista. The UFC is planning on making this a main event, and that means it's not going to be on the pay-per-view in Abu Dhabi. It's likely to be on like a Saudi Arabia card. Now, I don't know when the UFC is going to Saudi Arabia next, but I would assume, given the last time they did the Saudi Arabia card in January for Adesanya and Imavov, that this fight wouldn't be until next year. Which is great, which is fine. It's a lot of time off for Nurmagomedov. But you know what? I really like this fight. I really love this fight. It's competitive. Mario Bautista, phenomenal gas tank. So this is not one of those situations where you're looking at Umar Nurmagomedov and he's got a chance to just break someone. Mario Bautista's not going to break via gassing out. He's also well-rounded, also very fast on the feet. This is close to a 50-50. Now, of course, I am going to favor Umar Nurmagomedov. I think if you can give Merab that tough of a fight, I'm going to favor you to beat every bantamweight, to be honest. But this is just a really close fight. Very competitive. Bautista, no slouch with his grappling. Great striking. And Nurmagomedov, phenomenal striking. Of course, phenomenal grappling. This is one of the best matchups that the UFC could have made. So I really love the fact that they're booking this. And I really like the fact that Umar Nurmagomedov is taking Mario Bautista on. I mean, it would be easy for a guy like Nurmagomedov, because of the last name, because he just fought for the belt, to hold out for a big name like Sean O'Malley, but he's taking on someone with the smallest name, but happens to be the most elite guy with a small name, and that's Mario Bautista. So I respect it. This is a hardcore fans fight. I'm looking forward to this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Until next time.